My name is Patrizia Morgante, in charge of communications at UISG. I am very happy to welcome you and to welcome today's speaker, who's Professor Riccardo Petricca. He's going to help us reflect on the challenges of artificial intelligence in its various applications, especially when it comes to pastoral work and education. Welcome, Professor Petricca. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Before I present and introduce you, I call you by first name. I'd like to specify that this meeting is a meeting, and this webinar, as many that we've done and that we will have, these are formation meetings, especially for communicators and general superior in preparation for the International Communications Meeting for Religious Life that will be held in November, end of November, from the 27th to the 30th. One of the objectives of this international meeting is formation. We need to be properly formed if we work in communications to inhabit this world, but at the same time, we need to become the conscious digital citizens, even if we have a different role from those working in communication. These challenges of intelligence challenge us as religious and lay people, so that we can all somehow work, because we all work in the education apostolate. I give the floor to my colleague Miriam, who's going to introduce Professor Petricca. Good evening or good day, depending on where you are. I'd like to introduce Dr. Riccardo Petricca. He has a degree in communications engineering, and he has obtained many specializations, including business and economy of innovation, innovative economy. He has written many articles and published many writings, and he especially researches artificial intelligence and digital pastoral. I don't want to take up more time, so I give you the floor. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for this invitation and introduction. Thank you, Mrs. Morgante, for this opportunity to share my reflections on artificial intelligence, but in general, new technologies for innovation, or also training that we hear about in technical context. My background is more technical, but I will combine or especially deal with the educational and pastoral context in these new technologies. Let us begin with artificial intelligence. Let's give some brief introduction. Let's explain the terms. Artificial intelligence is a series of different technologies that interact to allow machines to perceive, understand, act, and apprehend and learn at the intelligence level that are similar to the human ones. So we underline perceive, understand, act, and learn. So we are still far from the term think. Artificial intelligence, it's divided into two branches: general artificial intelligence, or the strong one, or the restricted artificial intelligence, or the weak one. As far as the strong or general artificial intelligence, that's what we are used to seeing in science fiction movies, where machines or robots imitate human intelligence, thinking in a strategic, abstract, and creative manner with the capability of managing a series of complex tasks. We have not yet developed this artificial intelligence at this time, but we are not that far as many might think. The one that we usually deal with and that we've dealt with for the past 10 years is the restricted or weak artificial intelligence. Most of the applications are the ones that we also experience in everyday life. This carries out a single task or a series of activities that are closely connected. These systems are very powerful, but of course, the action scope is very limited. With the proper application, the restricted artificial intelligence has a huge potential to be transformed and continues influencing the world where we live. And then we'll look at some applications and the variants when in the banking industry, the computer telecommunications context, but also, especially today in the health industry, especially with the advent of COVID, some technologies of artificial intelligence were seeking to prevent, find cures with regard to COVID-19 based on this large amount of data that were received every day due to for the cases that were being treated at the hospital. At the basis of artificial intelligence, we find a technique that's called machine learning. Some examples of artificial intelligence, as Patrizia Morgante said, are chat GPT. We've come to GPT-4, the fourth generation. And that is what we find on all newspapers. This robot, this intelligent robot that we can talk to and that surprises us with its answers that are increasingly similar to the one of a human mind. But we had Google Assistant, we had Siri at Apple and Alexa in Amazon. Many of us had that on our nightstand, our table, or if it was integrated into smartphone systems. We have Baidu, that's the alternative that was developed in China, the rival, Google's rival, as well as ChatGPT. And that is what we have been working on a lot at this time. There are also themes connected to different regimes. There are some rights or limitations. Often we think that internet was created especially for freedom of expression. Also, in a context of artificial intelligence, there are many limitations. We think, for instance, that the chat developed by Baidu, contrary to the Google ones, that brings out immediately the images that respond to our request. If we speak on Baidu, the artificial intelligence engine, the engines such as Google, if we look for the square, it will bring out just the monuments and no marches or no other references to other facts. Today, Google has realized that Chat GPT, that was chat developed by an organization called OpenAI, initially free organization, but then it received funds, and Elon Musk is included among its founders, who then abandoned. But anyhow, it is of foundation that revolutionized this chat that is now changing the situation of artificial intelligence over the last few months. Google is now, Microsoft is very much interested in purchasing it. Google, on the other hand, developed BART, that is the rival of GPT. These are just a few names because we often hear about them and we read about them. But aside from the names, the companies that support them show us what world giants, how Google, Amazon, Apple, we understand why all of these are investing thousands of euros in this studying this artificial intelligence. And we understand that this is the future. I will show you something that is very important, but in the meantime, it also reminds us of a special story, the one related to linguistic IT, and to better understand each other. We're talking about Alexa and other smart speakers, as they are known, the ones that interpret, understand, and speak with a human voice. So we can ask how the weather is, or play a song, or tell us a story, and it will give us answers about everything. This computer linguistic was developed, or rather, we should say that the first form of this artificial intelligence that had a possibility to express itself. Its founder was Father Roberto Busa in the 50s and 60s. He was the father of computer linguistics. He was a Jesuit. He was a linguist. He was a computer technician. So for many years, religion and religious people were never that far from this. He's the founder. His story is also very beautiful because he started with a thesis at the Gregorian University. He started a thesis on the theology of St. Thomas of Aquinas, trying to discuss the nectomixti. It was a beautiful work and a huge work, and he tried with manual tools. So with manual charts, he came to 11,000 manual cards, and he understood that his lifetime wasn't enough to create charts about theology. So he looked into the computer world, and he understood it could be very useful for his purpose. So he took he traveled to the United States, and he met with the founder of IBM, Thomas Watson. It is perhaps still the greatest company of hardware at the world. He presented his ideas, and Thomas Watson wrote him a letter telling him to go back to Italy and speak to the IBM team in Italy. They will give you everything that you need. So he did. He returned to Italy and he started studying. And thanks to IBM Italy, he created a lab that still exists in Gallarate for computer studies and to decodify the linguistics. He started with perforated cards, then magnetic tape, and then CD-ROMs and DVD. And his work today is collected. It's on the internet, and you can fit it in a USB pen. What initially required some huge machines. Just to explain that this is one one of the bases of artificial intelligence was developed by a very important religious man as he studied St. Thomas of Aquinas. Let us go back to the definitions. I said that at the basis of artificial intelligence, we have machine learning. Machine learning creates systems that learn and especially improve the performance based on the data used. The importance and the beauty of artificial intelligence that it tries to imitate the behavior of the human mind. So it learns from its mistakes, it learns from data that it receives. So the more things, the more data, the more information we make available in this algorithm of artificial intelligence, the more it is capable of improving its learning. Precisely what happens with the human mind. The more we make mistakes, the more we act, the more experience we have, the more we improve. There are many techniques based on the human brain, and the main ones are the neural networks, the RNAs. But more than 20 years ago, I started studying them, and in time they were surpassed by other technologies, but today they've come back and they are once again applied in many contexts. In addition to machine learning, there are more sophisticated techniques such as deep learning. I don't want to get into these terms. I will leave you with a vast bibliography that can be used to study and deepen the topics of artificial intelligence. But machine learning has finds applications in many fields. From going from information clusters, I'll show you a practical case, fraud analysis, abnormalities in cybersecurity, and also in diagnostics of a disease, face recognition, uh, voice and writing recognition, all the way to autonomous life. Today, it is already being experimented in the US or even in Europe. There are some cars, automobiles that can drive independently without a driver. There are also very important ethical issues here. A car that drives itself, and if it has an accident, whose fault is that? Is it who's to blame? The builder, the software designer? There's a lot to be explored and a lot of work to be done at this. If a smart car has to choose whether to run over a person or have an accident that risks the driver's life, what will it choose? These are also topics for science fiction movies like I, Robot, the movie taken from Isaac Asimov books. These were dealt with, but nowadays they are current because we are headed in that direction. A machine learning that can be divided between supervised or unsupervised. The difference is if the car learns by itself and if we don't give it the appropriate answer, or if we just correct it when it makes mistakes. These are two technologies, and I will not get into too many details, but these are different techniques that are designed based on different algorithms. Clustering, of course, given many types, you can classify by color, you can classify when we see the example in potatoes and beans. This is an evident example of this type of recognition. It is simple, quote unquote, but at the same time, it could take a long time. For a machine, this is a very quick process, such as face recognition. From a picture, you can search the internet, you can search You can search for all the similar images based on the sample photograph. Another important application is in gaming, and this has been so for years. So video games are are in advanced in technology, especially graphics. But nowadays, artificial intelligence techniques are increasingly creating games that are more interesting and more desired by young people, especially, but also adults. With artificial intelligence has shown that even in chess, for example, the computer that managed to beat the chess champion, the world champion, or AlphaGo in 2016, the computer managed to beat the world champion. Also, when it comes to games and in many techniques, the machine proves to be superior when it comes to speed as compared to human mind, especially in the calculation and in speed. Of course, many things are still missing, such as intuition and emotions. But beyond these aspects, gaming also presents dangers, especially for young people who get into this world and sometimes are imprisoned in the video games. Well, that's an entirely different story that has to do with pedagogics and education. The dangers of artificial intelligence. I will spend some time with this because there are, first of all, some privacy issues. We've already mentioned face recognition, and its use can lead to violations of the privacy, the intimacy of the user. Lately, uh, there was a case of a vacuum cleaner that was taking images and photographs so during while it was used at home. So it violated privacy. They said that this was aimed at improving its use, but it was in violation of the privacy of a home and a family. So these are very important issues because machines such as the internet or the smartphone know us better than we know ourselves. They have information about what we do, where we go, who we call, what we search for. It has happened to everybody that we are offered the specific contents even before we think about it. And then we realize that these are things we're actually looking for. I'm not talking about classic advertisement that follows us if we were searching for a vacuum cleaner. If we search for a vacuum cleaner, the internet will suggest us many vacuum cleaners. No, I'm saying that sometimes we are offered things that we never even searched for, but that we actually use based on the previous searches or based on what we publish. Some artificial intelligence algorithms actually know us. A very stupid example, silly example. Some time ago, I went to a place in Google used to told me that I had already been there and I couldn't remember. This was in Naples. When I came back, in fact, I realized that I had been there 10 years before. Google had that journey and remembered it, whereas I did not. Use of autonomous arms, of course, we've already unfortunately had the opportunity of seeing this on TV during the last conflict between Russia and Ukraine, the use of increasingly destructive and smart weapons Obviously, one of the applications is in the military. Deep fake or social manipulation with artificial intelligence. We can reproduce a video, therefore, or perhaps even just the voice, not just the voice, but all the verbal or non-verbal communication of certain people, certain famous people or not. And with through Google, there can also be some frauds, computer frauds, and also social manipulations, because you can have a person speak and make believe that they're saying some things when they are actually not. Discrimination of race and gender. Obviously, the resumes, when you are selecting personnel, the first thing you do nowadays is you go to Facebook, LinkedIn, or the social networks to look at these people. There are some algorithms, and these can be influenced or programmed in certain ways based on beliefs, that are related to ethnic group, gender, etc. There's a there's a famous sentence of Stephen Hawking, who said that artificial intelligence does its task very well. Of course, it aims at reaching its objective. And if we are designing a hydroelectrical plant and we find an ant farm, we would have no issues in removing this ant farm to build this electrical plant. Let us we let us try to ensure that humanity doesn't end up like the ant farm. Stephen Hawking was already very concerned about this about 10 years ago. This is an ample bibliography about artificial intelligence, ethics. There are many articles. Specifically, I suggest a book that is called Ethics of Artificial Intelligence by Luciano Floridi. He's an Italian researcher. He's a teacher in Oxford, and for years with his group, he's been studying and dealing with the ethics of artificial intelligence in these times. Ethics and artificial intelligence. A Soviet writer, the father of science fiction, Isaac Asimov, in 1942 already spoke about ethics and laws for robotics. We and we are not too far from those that we're trying to develop today, but he, in his books, his science fiction books, he was also a scientist, a biochemist. He was already beginning to talk about laws that had to be at the basis of the behavior of a robot. So a robot could not damage human beings. The robot had to obey the orders, and disobey if they violated the law. A robot had to safeguard its existence as long as this was not in contrast with the first and second law. Ethic, ethics in artificial intelligence is widely found. Today, we speak a lot of algorithmics. Father Benanti is one of the main scholars in these algorithmics, dealing with artificial intelligence and new technologies. He is a teacher at the Gregorian University, and he talks about this algorithmics, that is, ethics applied to algorithms. Algorithms are just instructions that you give to a software program, in this case, a robot, or to a chat box, or any system that uses artificial intelligence. So GPT chat, what is it? Is come to age because it's surprising how intelligently it responds to whatever question. We can download it in our on our phone, in our smartphone. We are at its fourth generation, and you can download it and speak to him. I've done it. Many post the results of their questions and conversations. And it is very surprising as to how it answers, especially in some cases we don't realize that we're talking about artificial intelligence. In other cases, we realize it because it does give very in-depth questions, especially when it comes to computer science. It can give very quick answers, whereas a regular programmer would require hours or days to create that algorithm. Here, of course, I had fun and I wrote, "Who are you?" And the answer is language model developed by OpenAI called ChatGPT. I'm trained to respond at the questions and have conversations. How can I help you? Are you artificial intelligence? I was asking the artificial intelligence what was artificial intelligence and who he was. Here too, we had a case about less than a year ago where a Google researcher was searching in artificial intelligence, and he became afraid because he thought that the robot had begun having emotions. There's also a lot to say about this. We don't know whether it's true, whether they just made it up for marketing purposes. But of course, if it's not already happening, we're not too far from these results. I asked him what the dangers of artificial intelligence were. Of course, he discussed it. I got a little afraid when I asked him, "Could you be dangerous?" And at that moment, I got an error. And then when I asked it again, he answered. But the problems about ethics in artificial intelligence are essential themes. Along with artificial intelligence is something that we discuss a lot, which is the metaverse, so the virtual world connected to internet that was launched by Facebook Zuckerberg about a year ago. There much debate. Zuckerberg relaunched it, changed its name, changed the name of the company. You find it on Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. It is a potential evolution of internet, a connection of integrated and increased spaces. It's a series of technologies at the basis of the metaverse. In addition to virtual reality, we also find artificial intelligence. In conclusion, obviously, as we said, ethics and the issues, the dangers connected to artificial intelligence are today a topic for debate. It is essential, especially in the pastoral context, to apply to use new technologies, artificial intelligence, for instance, the cybersecurity in our companies, in our religious institutes, the congregations, the parishes. I don't think there's one that does not own one or more computers. The issue of security in computer science is essential, especially for ideology reasons connected to the fact that you want to attack religious institutions. The Vatican receives tens of thousands of cyber attacks every day. So, for ideological reasons or for reasons connected to uh, theft of data, or we are also these are also this is also crimes because connected to money. So there are attempts to attack our institutions as well, so we have to defend ourselves with cybersecurity, and at the basis of that we find artificial intelligence. There are other themes. There's also virtual visits of museums, churches. So we need to use and know these environments. These are no longer tools, these are life environments. But we especially need to deepen the ethical and pedagogical aspects. The church was at the forefront with regard to aspects connected to ethics, morale. So today, more than ever, these new technologies need to be further explored. The church must work hard to help us. I will leave you with a sentence that some people ask, will artificial intelligence replace me? Is it going to take my job? Certainly, I answer no. It will not take our job away or replace men, but certainly will be replaced by someone, a person, a man, a person who knows how to deal and use artificial intelligence. So thank you all for your attention. Of course, I leave all my contact information, or you may also ask Mrs. Morgante or the others. I now leave all my main information. Thank you so much. And I will now leave you for some moments of reflection. Thank you, Ricardo, for this overview that you presented. I think it raises very many questions. Thank you also for mentioning Benanti and the algorithmics and the Pontifical Academy for Life before COVID, or I think right before the COVID, had organized an international meeting here in Rome, whose final result was an agreement, an agreement between the companies, as you mentioned, the companies that have money to research, and the universities and citizens, and that may be found on the website of the Pontifical Academy for Life. As I listened to you, Ricardo, I understood that it is a process that we cannot stop. Artificial intelligence does some things better than us because we are limited, and artificial intelligence ultimately is not limited. Your microphone is muted. The third point is that the legislation, not only at the national but also at the international level, is not up to speed with these systemic changes that are happening in society. So I'd like to ask you, before we open a debate, because I see sisters here who work in education and pastoral activity, I would ask two questions. The first one is, what ethical issues does this reality raise? We who work with people, we who want to work with the awareness of the people. So what questions does this raise? The second question is, how much does it cost to protect ourselves? What is the cost of cybersecurity for a congregation that is not a company? I look at the UISG in order to protect ourselves from attacks. So these two questions, if you can help us with these two questions. You said it very clearly. Institutions have realized this and they are working in this direction. The European Communion in 2017 and 18, I mentioned Floridi because there is a research group, and we mention him as an expert, as a guide, but there's a nice research group that is working on the rights, the human rights with regard to artificial intelligence. So there are several UN projects and also the I for good, even the term good and God reminds us something, but also other states like the US or China are questioning themselves about artificial intelligence issues. It has to be socially beneficial. It has to create and reinforce fair presuppositions. No, it must not reinforce unfair prejudices. It must be responsible with users. It must integrate principles for privacy. It must maintain high scientific standards, and it must be available for uses that are in conformity with principles, all concepts on which many states are questioning themselves. So the ethical aspects are really very many. The law sometimes has trouble in keeping up, but they are trying to respond, and there are group works that are continuously looking into this. Cybersecurity is another essential topic. I wonder the cost of not applying it. In my book, there's also an anti-hacker checklist. Well, first of all, formation. So what you're doing, the training offered by UISG through the webinars, but also the lessons we teach at the universities at Urbaniana, the cybersecurity topics are topics that we have to face on a daily basis. There's certainly the issue of protection, but also the backup issues. March 31st is the World Backup Day, that tries to raise awareness to do backups because loss of data can be a disaster. A loss because of a hacker attack or a virus that erases everything. And we might be asked for a ransom, or the hardware can crash or bugs can get in. So it's the day for awareness raising to save our data. Backup backup um, means are available to all, either on a hard disk or the cloud memory that Google, Apple, and other companies make available. Then there's a more technical topic, which is to have someone who can help us, to have an expert in the field that can help us verify whether our structure is properly protected. How can we protect ourselves from theft? We protect ourselves with with video cameras, with gates, and so on and so forth. But we also have to defend ourselves from a digital standpoint. Our life today, most of our life is happens on the internet through the smartphone, computer, tablet, our personal and business life. How costly would it be to lose some data? There, there's losing our data would cause a very high loss in money in business, in addition to also causing physical ailments because we can get depressed if we lose our photographs or our projects that it took years to prepare. Thank you, Ricardo. We are receiving some questions. I want to thank you especially for underlining the importance of formation. It is not, as I said at the beginning, it is not just for us who work in communications, but it is for all our sisters, even the older ones who sometimes use smartphones without having knowledge, and they may send data or visit websites, setting aside the pornographic area that doesn't seem as serious as these situations in this case. But they may find themselves in very difficult situations or complex situations affecting the entire institute. So encouraging formation and awareness raising in sisters is not just a professional issue, but it is in order to inhabit this reality with a paradigm that is completely different from the one many of us, because most of us grew up in an analogic context. We're getting some questions. Thank you. But now I ask you 1 minute or a few seconds of silence to allow our interpreter to take a breath, but also for us, because asking questions, phrasing questions requires us perhaps to review our notes, to ask some timely question. This will not be our only webinar on this topic, but we're going to take advantage of Professor Petrica's knowledge. He not only is an engineer, but he's also involved in digital pastoral. So let's take a moment of silence to reconnect with our questions.
Potete scrivere le vostre domande nella chat o avremo il modo anche di intervenire live.
You can write your questions in the chat box and we'll have a way to step in Italian and English.
Riccardo, se vuoi guardare la chat, puoi guardare un pochino le domande, intanto tu ci rifletti, ma io piacerebbe molto dare la parola live a qualche partecipante per domande dirette, anche per dialogare.
I'd like to also give the floor for some direct questions. In the meantime, I can say that the presentation and the recording of this webinar will be available in English and Italian in a few days. And somebody was asking about Spanish. We will think about this effort. Everything has a price, so we have to think about it, and then we'll let you know. If anybody wants to also speak up to give a brief testimony of a personal experience, you can use your hand, the electronic hand that you find in the reactions icon. That gives you the opportunity to raise an electronic hand. So, and I give you the floor.
Nel frattempo che qualcuno
While while we wait for someone to dare to speak directly, let us use the questions that we received through the chat. So I would take advantage.
Se ci puoi dare qualche esempio concreto di come in futuro
If you can give us some concrete example of how this can have a negative impact on us in the future. A sister is asking whether we are risking a Terminator scenery, and if you can tell us how safe it is to do a backup on the cloud. How safe is the cloud? The Terminator scenario is typical, is a typical scenario of a science fiction movie that was that went strong in the 80s and 90s. The same risk was already highlighted by the founder of ChatGPT. Artificial intelligence can become dangerous to itself and the human being. It is one of the risks that I was mentioning. If it is not ethically correct, if we don't have some laws at the basis of agoretics, as Father Benanti says, several years ago, this was also mentioned by another Jesuit father, Father Antonio Spadaro. These are fundamental themes, and we can really run into problems. There are some algorithms that are inserted into the arms for mass destruction. The arms are wrong to begin with, of course, but unfortunately they exist. If they are programmed in an ethical manner to strike only military objectives, quote unquote, their use would be, so to speak, a little better than could than a normal. But the danger is that they're programmed to cause the biggest amount of damage possible. And we have to deal with this every day in the Russian and Ukrainian conflict. But there are many battles happening all over the world. So when it comes to the risks of artificial intelligence, there's the use of these machines to cause damage, sometimes unintentionally. They are programmed to do something bad, something evil. And they can also be used for frauds, for computer frauds to steal information, money, especially in the illegal world. This is done by using some virtual coins, bitcoins. some important issues that have to be dealt with, because oftentimes this technology is connected to the world of money, economy, and finance. But with blockchain, you can also do a lot of good in the church environment. There's a project that I've been working at for a long time, the use of, including the use of blockchain to certify or validate the certificates that are issued in parishes and the diocese, and such as baptism or confirmation certificates, especially marriage certificates. Riccardo, can you explain to us what a blockchain is? Blockchain, as the name indicates, is a chain made of blocks. It's a technology that has at the basis of a cryptocurrency, that is to create virtual coins. Bitcoin obviously is the most famous one, but there are many others. But this technology was developed in 2007. We don't know who invented this because he remained anonymous. They tried to create safe transitions. When we do an act with also legal value, how do we ensure that that certificate is unique and that it cannot be modified? We can do this through this blockchain technology that certifies that act as it was done. Any modification to that document will be traced, and we know that Riccardo Petrica on such a date modified that document or something, so we are certain that that is the original. It is what used to be done when we couldn't do photocopies. We had a certificate that was signed with a decree from the bishop that was the original, and there could be no changes. Any change, a letter or a word that was modified, was obvious. How can we be sure with digital documents today? So blockchain allows us to create transactions, documents that are unique and safe. I don't know if I was clear enough, but the final result is to create, the final use is to create documents and transactions. Thank you. I was trying to summarize the questions that we received. Obviously, I don't know whether I'm expressing everybody's feeling. You used some words that, as I read them, they do not pertain to my everyday life. But getting into this world means turning to experts. We don't have the possibility, but the first step is to understand, so as to also make a clear request to those that we address. I will summarize some other question. I have a question live, and then I will give the floor, and then I will summarize other questions. Simona, please introduce yourself. We cannot hear you. Your microphone. This is a communicator who's not communicating. As you fix your microphone, what can the impact of artificial intelligence be on formation? I suppose we are referring to religious formation, candidates, novices, etc. Do you have some example, some good practice of artificial intelligence applied to youth ministry? third question. What can we learn from how artificial intelligence learns? Very interesting question, genius question. Last two questions, and then we'll see if we have enough time for others. Let me finish the questions. 1 second. Last two questions. How can we protect our data? Because international congregations exchange data information and sometimes even documents or copies of personal documents, even copies of health documents. I'll leave you with these questions. We now give the floor to Simona. Good evening. Thank you, Professor Petrica. My name is Simona Borello from Mediacore. It's a communications company that in the religious world, and I personally have a brief communications course for religious teachers who were talking about students about AI a few days ago. I would like to have your opinion also in light of the formation activity you have about the fact that we are in a context where everything always seems to be new. We have 30 years of internet, but there are no literacy practices and also practices to relate to technology. I am very Maclunian when it comes to this, about looking at the means and see what they prevent us from doing and what they allow us to do. In the Catholic environment, we start immediately with an ethical approach, good, evil, dangerous, or it's good for us, without questioning ourselves and looking at what possibility there is that can allow me or encourage me to create a better context. If we have if we want to have the impulse of collaboration, construction, of sharing knowledge, oftentimes we have trouble in seeing this. As soon as we receive a new device, such as we are looking into Chat GPT and others, we're always taken by the fear that this brings along instead of the potentials of the device. This is, of course, something that is constantly evolving, but I'd like to have your opinion and your approach when you come across formation situations in your environment. Yes, thank you for the many questions. I will try to reply to all of them. And we can also meet again or discuss this again. The impact of artificial intelligence on formation. It is essential. We think that, let's think about modern televisions, let's think about smart TVs. They may be programmed to offer to young people, our children, or anyone, to offer some specific contents. We're not only talking about forbidding some types of contents for minors or making simple choices. We're talking about automatically searching for contents because we want to offer Christian or Catholic formation with some nuances. We can program our devices, our smart TV, YouTube, and others to automatically choose the best training or formation that we want for young people or young girls. This is a classical example, but certainly artificial intelligence can have many applications in formation, in a formation aspect, from schools. There may be projects that, thanks to artificial intelligence, can improve the learning for young people or less young, but also for novices. We can do some projects or evaluate together because certainly there's a lot to be done. An example for youth ministry, certainly young people are those who are looking more into this new universe, GPT, gaming, and they inhabit these new life environments, and they are often at risk. They are at risk because of people who may use these systems as a fraud for non purely ethical objectives. Certainly, it is important to defend ourselves, to defend young people, but also it is important to create special applications of artificial intelligence. What can we learn? Can we learn as what can we learn from how artificial intelligence learns? A great question. So far, AI has learned from us. The algorithms that were developed were applied to machines based on how the human being thinks. The learning techniques are a wide variety, and certainly it can also improve the human learning. Using techniques to learn better is certainly one of the things that the machine can do, whereas human beings perhaps cannot learn as well, especially as quickly. Protecting our data for religious congregations, this is essential. The blockchain is certainly one of the techniques to exchange documents safely. Unique documents, as I mentioned, also the smart contracts, the for the contracts that are done also at the religious level. This is one of the most important applications for the safety and the security of the data that we're exchanging. Then there's also cryptography that is at the basis of the blockchain to ensure that documents can only be read by the final user so that they're not intercepted. And then, of course, we can turn to experts who can advise us about how we can protect ourselves. So with backups, with backups, there's always a risk, of course, even if we save our data on devices or a USB, it can be stolen. We can lose our information because it gets unprogrammed. The risks always exist. The cloud, well, nobody can absolutely guarantee for it, but in general terms, the major companies such as Microsoft, Apple, and Google work to increasingly protect our information. So quite they're quite safe. Just as our information is quite safe if you save it on a USB device, there's never total security. So my advice is always to have a physical copy on a hard disk or a flash key, but also on the cloud. As you do with money, diversify your investment. The same can be done with your data. Just diversify your backup devices so you have more than one physical one material device, and and a virtual one on the cloud. I thank Simona. Her contribution was very interesting. With regard to digital literacy, there are some structures there, Professor Rivoltella, whom you may know, Dr. Carencio. We have WECA, guided by a journalist, Fabio Borzetta, who tries to raise awareness about the digital world. There's CREMIT, the Sacred Heart Catholic University. A lot is being done. On a personal note, with my group of colleagues and friends, we study these topics of digital ministry. Also, thanks to the cooperation of UISG. On Thursday, UISG will be at the Urbaniana. We study these themes of literacy, digital ministry, and of course, we try to apply it to practical contexts. I every day develop projects, even with my wife, who's a teacher, to try to educate the young boys and girls to a correct use of new technologies. Unfortunately, we are often faced with cases of alienation. These young people often think that Minecraft are the actual reality. There are many parallel realities that they think is the actual one. Sometimes there are monsters related to pedophilia or pornography, cyberbullying. Other times, the young boys and girls will empty their parents' credit cards because these games have a cost. So all of this is connected to information and education. It's a very important topic, and it also concerns religious congregations who oftentimes have schools or elementary or secondary schools. I hope I didn't skip anything. Thank you, Riccardo. If there are other questions, I think that this was aimed at being just an introduction webinar. Some sisters in the chat box also raised the issue of the creation of a group about this. So you can suggest it to UISG. I think that there are capable institutes that are already doing this. Even the Pontifical Academy for Life reflects on these topics. So I think it'd be appropriate to continue having spaces for reflection at the level of at the leadership level, but even at our level, for those who work in communication, to reflect, to deepen, at least to be informed. I think that this is essential. I wouldn't want to steal too much time from you. There are also other questions. I would just ask one in conclusion. Can I have an? I'm here, I'm available. It is truly a pleasure for me, and I hope that I can really gives a contribution. There are very many topics, and really I congratulate you because formation for me is at the foreground. Even when we speak about internet websites in at the Urbaniana, there's a course that is called "How do you create a website?" Or you cannot just you learn how to do a website all at once. But at least if you need to prepare a website or create a website, you know how it's done and who you can turn to and make sure that the job is well done. Okay, so let's conclude with two positive notes. The first one is a comment of his sister who said that perhaps artificial intelligence can improve accountability, that is, a capability to give an account also in the church in the when it comes to abuse or finance. So perhaps it can help us to become more transparent. But there was another question also that I appreciate. What can we expect as far as positive notes for emission from AI, which is not the future but the present? No, sorry if I say this because we think that it's something that still has to come, but we're already completely involved. Yes, this is not the future, it's the present. Also, in the mission environment, one of the topics that we're going to deal with next year at the Urbaniana, the General Secretary, Soreva, is the topic of artificial intelligence and mission. So how can it be useful? How can we improve? There are very many projects. One of the main topics that AI can respond to is when we have a lot of information that is mission really offers thousands of pieces of information pertaining to the country, the ethnic group where it needs to happen, people. By correctly using this information, we can improve our way of doing mission. This is one of the main topics. Artificial intelligence is very good today to analyze this information and in providing solutions, as well as perhaps understanding where we're going wrong, or perhaps understanding where our strength is and invest in that direction, or offer our strengths to other realities that are not familiar with it, or applying those things that we do well in other realities, but always taking into account the specific reality that we're working with. These are the things that artificial intelligence can do very well, analyzing data and providing new answers and new solutions about how we can improve. It is certainly one of the main applications. Then we can study many more because there are really many applications. Those who work with these in the first person knows the need and must be capable of translating the specific need into an algorithm or software in order to offer a solution or provide tools to make it better. That is the objective of the human being, to always improve and to aim at the holiness. Thank you, Ricardo, for dedicating so much time to us. I know that you are busy and you are facing difficulties. Before we conclude, I want to give you a task. These classes that you offer at the Urbaniana are very valuable, but if you only do them in presence and in Italian, so I'll make you turn you into a spokesperson, and I ask you to to offer them online and perhaps in several languages in order to share this knowledge. So I give you this message. Well, you can help me at this, even with Sister Etra, and perhaps with your experience. Well, translation certainly is essential. As far as online, before the pandemic, I had already offered the possibility to attend classes online. There were some difficulties at the time. Today, it is a little more simple. The pandemic taught us that we can actually use the internet for good purposes. So we usually do this. Okay, but also in other languages. So you've become now the spokesperson to transmit this message. Thank you. We go toward the end of our webinar, and I repeat once again that the presentation and the recorded video will be available in two languages, in English and Italian. We'll see if we can also offer it in Spanish. We also want to announce, we cannot specify a date, but we know that at the end of April, the presentation of the digital platform where we're going to gather all this material will be available for religious life. This is all material that can be useful for those who deal with communication, but also for general superiors or all those who need to reflect on some topics. So we would launch this at the end of April. It will be a digital platform that will contain material for research, but also all the information pertaining to the international meeting that we held in November. We invite you to take part to this presentation or to watch it later, because we will also be discussing collective intelligence methodology in order to together come to define the challenges of the program for the international meeting. Another thing that I'd like to share with you, this week we sent a questionnaire to the communicators in religious congregations that are members of UISG at the general and provincial level in order to gather information about the reality of communication. Another objective of this international meeting is to do a mapping of the communications reality in the congregations that are members of UISG. So if your communicators did not receive this, please let us know, because you either did not give us that information or we perhaps did not receive it. So we patiently ask you to please inquire, see if they've received this questionnaire. If not, please let us know in order to forward it. Communicators at the general and provincial level. Now, we conclude by thanking Ricardo again, Miriam, the technicians who supported us, and Marilu for the translation. Before we conclude, I would ask you to please share one word in the chat box to summarize how you feel right now after this bombarding of words that really do not directly pertain to us. A few words to establish, share the puzzle that we can give back to Ricardo so he can see what he caused through his reflection.